Hey everybody, and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program RP-0. We are rejoining our crew here on the surface of Mars as they try to make some sense of this situation. This is very briefly taken from our last episode where we were transferring life support supplies and then trying desperately to switch back to our valiant engineer, Laura Douglas, who now has a yet again busted rover to deal with. Thanks, Ascent Stage, for ruining absolutely everything. Uh, I think most of the pieces are intact. We do have a couple of spare wheels over in our storage container on the base proper so that we can make some sense of this whole thing, but we'll at least get 3 wheels on it, and hopefully it won't roll away on us. What we don't have right now is a command chair, forcing us to deal with this thing remotely. And of course, that means that there is signal delay on activating the brakes, which I will do. They will kick on in about 8 minutes' time. Fantastic. In the meantime, while this thing just kind of barrels down a hill, we'll try to go ahead and get some control of it. The best way to do anything with this right now is just kind of in reverse. It's pretty unstable, and yeah, well, it drives about as well as it looks. Fortunately enough, in a big circle, which is just awesome. Everything here is going real well. We do know our command chair is still intact somewhere, and now that we have some semblance of control of this thing, we can just drive it back someplace closer to where we need it to be. We'd like to get this fourth wheel attached so that it can at least be a little bit more drivable. So we'll switch through absolutely everything on the map currently, and hopefully nothing will explode. Get our engineer out here to attach said wheel, but of course we can't turn on the brakes, so it just kind of rolls away from us every single time. She can nudge it pretty well, which works for something. I tried to have her stand on top of it and then maybe start driving, but that didn't go very well. And also, that fourth wheel we are going to attach has fallen through the Martian surface all the way to the ground. So, yeah, that's a thing. Sure, why not? So we'll try to get this thing as close to this twin command seat, technically for helicopters, but we've used it for rovers before, and see if we can't just get it to stay still on this hill. Maybe if we park it against the command pod. Yeah. So the executive decision was made to kind of nudge the command pod closer to Laura Douglas, who will then sprint full speed across the surface. We've got another 3, almost 4 minutes until those brakes turn on. So, and there it goes. Sliding right past. Of course it does. And it's off. Yeah, and there's another wheel over there. That's a good thing. So we'll try to switch back to it, get it closer to that cockpit. The sooner we can get local control on that thing, the better off we will be on absolutely every single respect. So getting this thing attached is absolutely necessary when, well, this. All right, can we? Nope. Ah, it rolled away. All right, just set it down. Oh no, the hinge. Um, yeah, okay. And there's the switch that I hit a minute ago. The cockpit is flying in the air. Where is it? Please don't explode. Please don't explode. Oh, thank God. All right, well, let's go try to park next to it. I guess we're just going to have this hinge for a roof of some sort for absolutely forever. Because why not? Great. And yeah, so I think that battery pack over there we need to reattach also. I probably detached that earlier, and we'll just bolt this on just as quick as we can. And explosions! Hey, we're free of the hinge. Who knew? Thank God it didn't blow up the cockpit, but upside down or no, Lord Douglas is going to drive this thing until we can get some wheels on it. Getting out is a little iffy, but now that we have the brakes turned on, thank you for local control, we can try to move this thing around to the front-ish. When the idea struck me that we have a extra control core here, this able core, and we can probably use that to self-destruct a bunch of the stuff that we don't need, since we won't have our be hitting the tonnage limit with this thing picking up supply pods as it was intended for, we don't really need the extra avionics control, nor do we need the headlights. Headlights are purely accessories. Anyway, we need to do some repairs to this, and detaching the docking port caused it to explode. That's just, yeah. We have a spare. It's just, you know, it would have been nice to have that one. So this is just a blank tank. It does need to be node attached. We'll just let it sit for right now. We don't actually need it, per se. Alright, let's get this thing unbolted. There we go. Come on. Yeah, there we go. Alright, I would like to get rid of this gantry rail, because I would like to not attach the base to it. Oh, will only the bottom part move? Uh-oh. Please no, please no, please. Jesus. Oh god, please don't anything else explode. Alright, the rover's mostly intact. There's our fourth wheel. Where's our structural bits? I would really like those. Did they not survive? Oh, they did. They're just someplace else. And this thing is entirely undrivable because now all of the weight is in the front. So reverse gear being our only real option. We're just going to get a fourth wheel on this thing and we'll try to balance it out a little bit later. I would really like to keep this core. It also just needs to be node attached because of course it does. That's a little too far away. And I would like to build off the back of that thing. See, the gantry rail is still attached to this thing, despite it having exploded some other bits that I would have liked to have kept. That's just fantastic. Alright, the rover's a little too far away, so we're going to move in closer, get this rail attached, so at least we can get a fourth wheel in somewhat of a usable position, hopefully while it's on the upstroke of its bounce. Fantastic. And then we'll just mount the core back there because where else is it going to go? And back inside, it's still completely undrivable in any gear except reverse. So we do need to keep this battery. That will help with the longevity of the rover. It does have RTGs, but, you know, I'd really rather just have some storable electric power on this thing, because I think those RTGs are going to have to get moved over to the base proper. That one solar panel is not going to be enough to feed that habitat module. So once again in reverse gear, we go off on a quest for our fantastically durable structural bit, and then try to pull up next to it in some kind of way that doesn't cause everything to blow up. So we'll get the core out of the way. Like I said, I think we're going to use that to detonate a bunch of the other useless parts, and we need to be in a little closer here to get this thing mounted, and it does look like it mounted to the gantry rail and not to our Rove Mate avionics core, which is kind of a problem, although it would take me way longer than I'm willing to admit here in this episode to figure that out. We're still in just this poor rover. It's becoming an abomination, and I had really hoped that maybe we could just attach this truck assembly as a single unit, but it's all bent, so we have to break it down into its individual parts, and trying to detach these hinges is well, more than just a little bit interesting. And of course, I can't mid-node attach this cross piece, which would have been nice to space out the wheelbase a little more, keep things from roving. And attempts to get these two octagonal struts off of these hinges, yeah, that yielded predictable results. The hinges just snap back together, or snap to their old root piece, even when you just detach them, and cause explosions. So both of those were pretty much a lost cause. We do have this piece, and why the rover is slowly drifting away from me I'll never quite understand, which now that I look at this in post, could have been used to even out the wheelbase between that long beam and this other two short beams, but that just seemed real weird, and I didn't quite want to do that. So instead, we're going to try to scrounge up parts wherever we can and try to get some kind of functionality out of this rover. We'll start with the rear wheelbase and just try to get things as attached as we can, and the further back we can make it, the better leverage we'll have as far as the rover's center of mass. Hopefully it won't tip up on its nose when driving all the time. And we were actually able to separate that hinge successfully. I don't know why that worked. We don't have another octagonal strut we can use for that right now, so we're just going to have to deal with an uneven wheelbase. We'll kind of address more of this wheelbase issue later on after I figure some other things out. So just for the sake of things being even, we'll reattach this other rear wheel at equal spacing with the front before disassembling the front wheelbase of the rover, trying to make it as evened out as we can. There's another octagonal strut we can use, if only I had actually bolted it to something. And for some reason, setting this front wheel down caused it to break. And man, that octagonal octagon strut would be really nice to have, but that hinge is just not giving up on it. So it's back to the cubic octagonal strut we go as far as a wheel mount is concerned. We'll just go ahead and bolt this busted wheel on for right now because, yeah, it's going to toss this thing up into the air. Sure, why not? That works. That's fair. That's just fine. It does give us an opportunity to access the other wheel and try to separate out its parts. We do have another octagonal strut here. Of course, we're going to lose the octagonal because of that hinge and all of its ensuing stupidity. But we'll try to get this thing flipped back over. It works reasonably well, just using the old bash it with your helmet method until it cooperates. And then we'll get the mount for the wheel in place. And then finally the wheel itself, eventually getting it bolted on. So now we have a somewhat even wheelbase. And here is the rare instance where a hinge actually separated from something. We'll attach it to this beam that we plan on disposing of later, before trying to maybe save this other octagonal strut. We got the thruster port off. At least that's something, but yeah, these two, yeah, it's just not cooperating. So we'll try to bolt it over there, and when the hinge snaps back to it, it causes some interesting crack and drive technology to spur into motion. We have these two other wheels over here from the other Science-y rover. We're going to use one of those, obviously, to get this rover back up and running. We'll see if we can't separate this hinge. Yeah, no, not even going to be a thing. So we'll just bolt it on here and get it ready for disposal. We'll pick up this strut piece because otherwise it's going to cause a problem later. You just know that it is. But honestly, I think we're going to put a big hiatus on attaching robotic parts to anything in the future. They were absolutely necessary for this rover in its original intended purpose of resupplying the surface base itself, but having to work with them here in this more emergency situation has just proved absolutely awful. Yeah, this wheel, I got the mounting for it absolutely all terribly wrong. We're going to have to pull that wheel off and reattach it later, but I think in the meantime, we'll grab this tire and just put it over here, which this was a mistake. Alright, can we detach this? It's not attached to the hinge, so maybe we can... Oh, no. No, please, no. Please, no. Oh! Okay, how bad? The wheel's still intact. Yeah, I think the octagonal octagon got destroyed. Of course, the hinge, or at least half of it, survived. You would, wouldn't you? Anyway, alright. Board. Oh, come on! What the hell? Why is this a thing? Oh, Jesus. And our two antennas got blown up when we moved a robotic part wrongly. Oh! Well, there's an explosion we didn't need. I wonder what that was. And nice to know this thing came equipped with ejector seats. Take in the view. You'll be here for a while. So we need to get an antenna to flip this thing around. We're going to take this opportunity of the rover being up on its side, giving us a clear view, as a good chance to reset that wheel before. Yeah, we'll try to use the helmet method to get it upright. It doesn't work. I'll just ruin the next 10 seconds of your life for you. This is a terrible idea. So we're going to have to quest like Frodo all the way back to the ascent stage. We'll check over here very briefly. No comms. They're all four that are surviving are bolted to the ascent stage, and I would really like not to blow up another one. I can't believe we lost 2 spares in a single incident. That was just dumb, so we'll force retract this one, grab another one just in case, and then run full sprint across the Martian surface. God, it's amazing how far away that ascent stage has just slid. This is going to make things interesting. Alright, so back at the rover now, we will bolt on an antenna, get it angled appropriately so that we can flip this thing right side up. Actually, after I bolt it on, force open, and right side up. Fantastic. We'll just leave that antenna there because we're probably going to need it again in the future. And the 2 back wheels not working. And this is, I think, the first time I've actually had a chance to drive this thing, and it's actually less drivable than it was before I've made all these changes. Now, typically, when a wheel refuses to operate at all, it's because there's something clipped into its collision box somehow. Usually through bad engineering in the spaceplane hangar when the thing was built. But I could not tell if anything was actually clipping in. I thought that maybe I just mounted them in such a way to where it was perceiving some clipping, and it's not. The truth of the matter is that the gantry rail is now considered a separate vehicle. Probably because I tried to remove it like an idiot. You just don't remove robotic parts from their host part, considering our host part is absolutely necessary at this point. There's really just not a whole lot we can do about that. I'm going to have to disassemble the rear of this vehicle and rebuild it, not attaching it to the gantry rail. So we've got a few other parts that we need to clean up over here, and I figure, well, while we've got all this accessory junk bolted onto this thing, now is as good a time as any to try to get rid of some of it. We can just try to grab a hinge. We really don't want to bolt it onto stuff, but of course it smashes into us, knocks her over. But the wheel itself is free, and that would be the part we're way more interested in because obviously we're going to need some spare wheels because I'm going to break them a lot. So we will detach this core and of course the robotic parts smash into it, destroying the one part we really needed to survive, the core. Yeah. So there goes my plans of using range safety to dispose of some of our accessory parts. It looks like we're probably just going to have some accessory parts sitting around. Now, some of these structural bits I'm not too keen on getting rid of right away. We might find a good use for them later when it comes time to service the ascent stage, or maybe try to bolt an engine underneath there so we can get some of that quickly fading thrust to weight ratio back. And if we ever find a fuel tank small enough to bolt to this rover, these thrusters could absolutely be useful for traction control and such. And that wheel just decided to go ahead and dispose of itself. That's cool. No big deal. None whatsoever. So these 4 thrusters well, these 3 thrusters. I think there's another one over by the ascent stage we'll go collect later. I'm still thinking we'll go on the ascent stage just to augment its TWR. Oh no, here's the 4th thruster and a decoupler. That's always going to be fun to have, but there's no more room on that hinge plate that we just absolutely can't get rid of. So for the time being, I think we'll hang on to that. And maybe, I think I was thinking that I could use the ejection force from the decoupler to get rid of some stuff. Honestly, I've forgotten. But this 4th thruster will go up here on this nice tower mount. I'm so glad those things aren't as easily crackened. And yeah, we'll pick up a random harpoon. Who knows when you might need a random harpoon. None of the wheels on the rear of the chassis are working at all, which, you know, that's predictable. Here's the rest of the stuff that got ejected when that core decided to randomly get blown up by a hinge that wasn't even attached to it. But, you know, I guess these things do happen. Fifth thruster port, because why the hell not? And we'll go ahead and relocate the battery a little closer up front, because we're going to dismantle this. And removing that wheel caused it to explode. That's greatly reassuring. Like I said, we do have 3 spares back in our service bay, so at least we have those to work with should that wheel broke and exploded, and then the other wheel exploded. There's so many things going on here that I really just do not understand. Alright, so we're going to reassemble the rear of the chassis. I was going to try to give it a wider rear wheelbase, and since the only 2 duplicate parts I have are these 2 truss pieces, I guess those are going to be the left and right sections. And I guess it's the antenna on that one that keeps causing it to wildly throw itself over. No big deal. That will cause it to smack its face into the ground. We'll try to get the alignment here just as even as we can. It actually looks pretty good. I think we can move this busted solar panel onto something else, and then maybe grab this thing, and it launches itself into the air. Thank God it didn't take anything out with it. And instead of risking bolting it to the rover, I think we're just going to kick it over here to this hinge piece and bolt it to it that way, in hopes that maybe by moving it around or something, we can make it self-destruct. But we need to make room on the hinge piece, so we're just going to move some of these parachute-y things around, grab this thing, try to find a node. Of course, we can't. It thinks that crate carrier is on the node, and yeah, for some reason it just doesn't want to attach. So we'll attach the hinge to it. No explosions, that's a first. And then jump back into our rover, which actually operates pretty well in reverse while dragging its face in the dirt. No big deal. Sometimes you just have to maintain the longest Martian wheelie ever on record. Why not? Alright, here is our spare wheels. I do not want to just set them on the ground for fear that they will explode. I will also transfer over some of these struts that we have because there's absolutely no point in lugging them around. And we're just far enough away to make being able to mount them straight to the truck chassis not a thing. So we'll have to back ourselves up here just a little bit, throw on the parking brake. Even though that should technically attach to the rear wheels, it still works. Why the hell not? And then get our rear wheels mounted to the chassis so that we can have some hope of having a functional rover. I guess when I started this magical endeavor, I had planned on getting the command seat and using this 2-person cockpit so that we could ferry crew members from the ascent stage into the livable parts of the habitat in a quick and efficient manner, which of course turned into like 2 hours of fixing the rover instead of just walking them over here, which would have took way less time. So we're also going to grab any sciencey, experimenty bits that we can. They'll probably do us more good on the rover if we should actually happen to be able to take it to a different biome. It's also a random strut we can just go ahead and get rid of. And these 2 laddery sections, which I absolutely know that we are going to need to use to make the ascent stage boardable in the future. But in the meantime, we can go ahead and bolt on our sciencey, experimenty bits, and then start to relocate things a little closer to the rear of the chassis. Now, it's still up on its front wheels because the brakes are set, and that's keeping it all off balance. Although, we'll put it in reverse, and rear wheel's still not working. As a matter of fact, everything back there is considered part of a separate vessel. It's just like accessing them from EVA when you're just a little too far away. Which, yeah, this is going real well. It keeps wanting to nose down, which I guess is to be expected when you've got all of the weight basically in front of your front wheels. It's not very drivable. So finally, I decided to go ahead and check the gantry rail. Oh yeah, hey, look at that. You know, we can still articulate it, and it moves the rear wheels, which is probably why the rear wheels aren't working. Yeah, I totally already spoiled that for you way earlier in the episode. So what we'll do is we'll lock the gantry rail as low as we can and then wait to get that attachment node on the bottom of the RoveMate core, jump back in, let it nose down, and look at that. Four-wheel steering, four-wheel drive. This rover is officially back in business. Now we have our single surviving ghost leg. These things are always so incredibly haunted, but just in an effort to clean up some debris, and again, this can be very useful if we decide to use it to service the rover, or not the rover, I'm sorry, the ascent stage. That could absolutely be used to help lift up a side of it so that we can get enough clearance underneath it to mount an engine. As you can see over there at the side, the engines are kind of clipped into things. So if we bolt a new engine to it, it's going to be a little lower than the other ones, possibly giving it not a very good footprint, possibly not a very stable platform to stand on, which is a whole lot of problems that are just a little bit further down the list. Now we have a thruster and a hinge, and the thruster was actually able to be detached from the hinge. It's a Mars Day miracle, I suppose. And then we'll go finally out here and collect our command seat, which is absolutely vital to pretty much everything that we want to do as far as moving crew back into the habitat. We don't really need it for any other purpose other than if something gets blown up, that is our contingency plan. So maybe it would be smart to go put it in the storage thing at the habitat module, or near the habitat, so that we can just be sure it doesn't get explodified. Anyway, with all of this said and done, now we can start ferrying some crew across. So we'll get our first two lucky Kerbals out, and we'll try to reset that goo container with one of our scientists, because that would be nice to do, although it just won't. And you can't run solar particle experiments inside of an atmosphere. Turns out this thing should have been run in high Mars, or space high over Mars, space low over Mars, but wasn't. Wheelbase in front, not quite wide enough. This thing still poses a very large hazard to flip itself over, which is why we're leaving that antenna on. Finally, she can be close enough to reset the goo container, collect the data from it, and then run it again and collect the goo from it. And we'll just try to do the same thing with this hydrogen data. I think those are all experiments we already have from this biome, so we'll probably have to venture out if we want to get any kind of pay dirt from this mission whatsoever. A lot fewer things to select through when going from Kerbal to Kerbal, but it's still super, super annoying. Just making sure that all of our life support there was unlocked, and now it's time to go back for our last remaining Kerbal in the ascent stage. We'll just blow right past one of our seismic experiments. Not entirely necessary. There's that random hinge, not touching that one with a 10-foot pole, and we'll finally get our last Kerbal. I think this is Jaguar. I could be mistaken. It's a little difficult watching it run through in 4 times time acceleration, but you know, that's the way things go. And a quick drive back to the base, a little nudge into it itself, and then we can finally get our last 2 Kerbals out eventually. I think I was switched to the gantry rail, and which made it so that I couldn't select the Kerbals that were in a completely different vessel, and I thought I just saw another landing leg out there. If we have 2, man, that's going to make things a whole lot easier. And Jaguar, of course, trying to be extraordinarily difficult and climb onto the underside of the ladder, which threatens to destroy the entire base. Look at this. Absolute madman. Alright, man. You figured out how to get to Mars. Can you please figure out how to use a ladder? He is instead going to use the climbing rungs on the outside of it and do some somersaults, because this guy just really needs to show off before finally figuring out how to use a ladder correctly. 1 year and 43 days of life support total for our crew here on Mars. Not enough for them to get to next window, but hopefully enough time for us to figure out how to get them back to orbit. That's going to do it for this one, everyone. Thank you so much for hanging out. I really do appreciate it, and I'll see all of you in the next one. So until then, see you later.